Now, I don't know about you guys, but just hearing about Iran and the United States not liking each other has been something that I've always been curious about the full depth and detail of what exactly happened. Not sure if you guys are aware, but on the news, a lot of people thought World War III was happening. The United States went in with some aircraft. They bombed all of the nuclear creation sites in Iran, and Iran retaliated by shooting 15 missiles at Qatar, which is an American-owned military base. And America shot down 14 of the missiles. The 15th one wasn't really going anywhere harmful, so they let it go and dealt with that shit appropriately. Obviously, when two countries are shooting fucking missiles at each other, it's never very good. And then obviously add Israel into the mix, and we got a recipe for disaster. So I would actually love to know what actually is going on. By the way, World War II happened from 1939 to 1945. Let's actually try to figure out what's going on here. Yeah, like, comment, subscribe if you enjoy content like this. But this seems very interesting.
Of one of the
Let's learn, boys.
world's most complicated and controversial relationships. The United States is the world's most preeminent superpower with a population of more than 320 million, while Iran is a major power in her own right, with a population of more than...
Yeah, when we accept Canada as our 51st state, by the way, they should change this color from red to blue, because we're never getting a Republican president ever again.
80 million. These countries represent 4% and 1% of the living human population.
It's a lot
and for the
less
past
than I'd assume.
41 years, they've had absolutely zero diplomatic relations and have come close to the brink of total war on more than one occasion. At the beginning of 2020, war between the two sides seemed almost inevitable. The United States assassinated an Iranian major general in a drone strike.
So give me some lore here. Actually, I'm going to Google this. Is Iran a first world country? The term first world country is a legacy from Cold War and is no longer used to classify nations. Oh, so that means they're not a first world country. Okay. So while we're fighting them with rockets and missiles, they're like fighting us with like sticks and rocks.
And Iran retaliated by initiating artillery strikes against American military bases across Iraq. Had a war broken out from there, it had the potential to become the biggest conflict in human history since the Second World War. This time, that fate was thankfully avoided. But in order to understand how it got so close and why it could still happen during another crisis in the future, you've got to understand the entire history of the conflict between America and Iran so far. And that story begins back before the start of World War II.
It's got to be like a girl, right? Like the two presidents, the president of the United States and the president of Iran, they both went to the same high school. And there was this really bad bitch from Japan, sexy as fuck waifu president from Japan, and they both wanted to bang this bitch. But because they were always fighting, she didn't want either of them. And so now they want to kill each other is what I'm going to go ahead and assume. That's my prediction.
At the beginning of the 20th
Hitomi
century,
Tanaka
oil
type chick
was first discovered within the deserts of Iran by the British. As more and more of these discoveries were made, it was revealed that Iran, in fact, contained the fourth largest proven reserves of oil anywhere on the planet.
Oh, it's over
and that
oil?
The country
Okay.
was an undiscovered and unrealized energy superpower.
Jesus.
The only
That
problem for
makes
the
sense.
British,
That sounds
of
like
course,
America.
was that these discoveries were located within Iran. And Iran wasn't within Britain's vast colonial empire that already spanned a quarter of the globe. Not too worried about that pesky little detail, Britain negotiated a deal with Iran to share in the massive profits that were bound to come from the extraction of all this oil. They created the jointly owned Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, but it wasn't exactly set up very fairly. Iran, the country where all of this oil was actually located, was only entitled to 16% of the company's profits, whereas the other 84% of profits were going directly to the British. By the start of the Second World War, the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company grew to control all of Iran's oil and had grown to become the largest company in the entire British Empire. But this massively valuable asset was coming under threats. Discontent at the company's unfair terms was growing within Iran itself, while at the same time in 1941, Nazi Germany...
So I'm assuming that like British and like America got way too strong before Iran, and so Iran had all these resources and we were gobbling it up, and then they were getting upset, but they couldn't do anything about it. Is kind of what I'm starting to think here.
Invaded the Soviet Union and opened up the largest military front line ever seen in human history. Iran stood geographically at the Soviet Union's southern flank, and their intentions were considered suspect by both the British and the Soviets. Despite having declared neutrality at the onset of the war, Iran's ruling Shah, or emperor, was widely considered by the Allies to be too friendly towards the Nazis. If Iran were to have cooperated with the Axis, it could have opened up—
No, you don't know them like we do. You know, the Nazis are horribly misunderstood. Yeah, I mean, that would kind of piss me off too.
another southern front for the Soviets to deal with that would have diverted vital troops away from the critical Eastern Front. It could have jeopardized the Soviet Union's own oil fields in the Caucasus right on Iran's doorstep, and it would have potentially placed Britain's largest oil company in the hands of the Nazis. So in order to prevent any of that from happening, and in order to ensure that Iran could be used as a transportation corridor to get vital supplies into the Soviet Union, neutral Iran was invaded by both the Soviets and the British. Vastly outnumbered.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good idea, guys. Okay, so I'm starting to understand where they were like, okay, we understand you're an empath and you think the Nazis are pretty cool, but we're gonna go ahead and let you not do that. Okay, that makes sense.
And far behind in technology, Iran never stood a chance and surrendered within just a week. The old troublesome Shah was overthrown and replaced by the invaders with his much younger 21-year-old son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, whom the Allies felt would be far less capable of acting against their interests. Iran was effectively occupied for the entire Second World War by the Allies, which eventually saw the deployment of more than 30,000 Americans and the transportation of nearly 1/3 of all the supplies that America sent to the Soviet Union. After the war ended, the Allies left and ended their occupation, but the unfair terms that the British had established in regards to Iran's oil came back into question. By the early 1950s, Britain was still taking home the majority of Iran's oil profits, while the conditions for Iranian oil workers and their families remained terrible. At the same time, the British were also withholding all of the company's financial records from the Iranians, and had refused all of their requests at being audited. The support for nationalizing the company within Iran was getting overwhelmingly massive, and by 1951, Iran's democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh, with unanimous approval from the Iranian parliament, finally did so. Britain responded to this by immediately embargoing all Iranian oil, and then 2 years later, in 1953, Britain's—
Hold up. An official ban on trade or other commercial activity with a particular country. Gotcha. Just wanted to make sure we all know what the word embargo meant. That's a big word. Okay, so they said, nah, fuck no, you're banned from trading with that country. Gotcha. Makes sense.
MI6 and America's CIA organized a military coup within the country to overthrow Mossadegh's government. As many as 300 Iranians were killed during the coup. Mossadegh himself was placed under house arrest for the rest of his life, while the Shah was elevated to being essentially an authoritarian dictator within the country. Having had his position installed and guaranteed by Western powers twice now, the Shah became widely viewed in Iran as little more than a Western puppet. And as the Cold War developed out of the ashes of the Second World War, Iran's strategic location at the Soviet Union's southern flank, her vast strategic reserves of oil, and her authoritarian leader who owed his position and loyalty to the West, made Iran a natural and valuable ally of the United States for the very first time. The Shah pursued a staunchly pro-American and pro-Israel foreign policy, and for decades, Iran became one of America's most important Cold War-era allies. But over the decades, the Shah's policies and cozy relations with the West alienated much of his home base support. He ran a vast network of secret police within the country who arrested thousands of political opponents, and many more, like Ayatollah Khomeini, were exiled. Widespread torture of political dissidents in prison was reported. He outlawed the Iranian Communist Party. He continued friendly relations with both America and Israel, despite nearly none of the rest of the Islamic world even recognizing Israel. While he—
Ooh, I feel like that's not going to age well, based on some spoilers I know. I feel like the Iran and Israel aren't really going to like each other too much. I have a feeling.
Carried out a domestic policy of modernization, secularism, and the enfranchisement of women. All of these policies combined alienated Iran's leftists, the working class, and the hardcore Shiite Muslim conservatives and clergy. And by the late 1970s, Iran's long-standing political unrest had transformed into full-scale revolution. A movie theater was set on fire in Abadan that killed at least 420 people, with the Shah's regime blaming Marxist and Islamist insurgents, while many of the protesters felt like it was more likely the Shah's own secret police. The following month, protesters gathered in the capital Tehran's main square, and the Shah's army opened fire on them indiscriminately, killing and wounding hundreds more.
That's crazy how this just looks like the LA riots that Hassan was endorsing.
More than 5 million Iranians took to the streets demanding the Shah's abdication, and after defections from his army became rampant, Mohammad Pahlavi realized that his position was impossible to maintain, and he fled the country in exile in early 1979. The new radical Shiite Islamist government that replaced the Shah's regime immediately abolished the monarchy and invited Ayatollah Khamenei back to the country after
5 million. That's a crazy amount of people.
Exile to become Iran's new supreme leader, and the modern Islamic Republic of Iran was born. And this new Iranian regime was radically different from the one that it preceded. It was a totalitarian Shiite theocracy that was staunchly opposed to the United States and Israel, and mass executions and purges of political opponents and members of the former regime were almost immediately carried out. To the United States and the rest of the world, Iran's Islamic Revolution came as an enormous shock. Almost overnight, Iran had flipped from being one of America's most important Middle Eastern allies to her greatest Middle Eastern enemy. After the Shah was overthrown, the United States—
And this is probably where all the death to America, death to Israel chants come from.
welcomed him into their country for a cancer treatment operation.
Yeah, this has been going on for a while,
demanded that he be extradited back to stand trial for the crimes that he had committed throughout his reign against the Iranian people. Knowing that his return would mean a certain execution, the United States rejected all of Iran's demands, but that did little to dissuade Iran's revolutionary paranoia. Since the Shah was actively inside America, and since Western powers had already initiated 2 previous coups in the past to install him over the will of the Iranian people, the paranoia was widespread that America and the CIA could be plotting yet another 3rd coup attempt from within their embassy inside Tehran. And so, in November of 1979, thousands of Iranian revolutionaries and students stormed the American embassy and took 52 American diplomats and civilians as hostages. America eventually sent the Shah away to Egypt, while the Carter administration worked for months to secure the hostages' release. But when diplomacy went nowhere, Carter authorized a raid by the United States Army Rangers in April of 1980 to attempt a rescue operation. But the raid turned into a disaster. Codenamed Operation Eagle Claw, a helicopter crashed into a transport plane.
Did y'all hear about the operation called Operation Midnight Hammer? I think that's what they called bombing the Iranian nuclear factories at night, which is crazy because I'm pretty sure Operation Midnight Hammer was also the same as the porn flick that your mother recorded with a BBC.
Before any contact with the Iranians was even made, and 8 American soldiers lost their lives. Carter ordered the mission to be abandoned, and the hostages remained under Iranian control. It was at this point that the United States decided to sever all diplomatic relations with Iran's new regime, and they have been frozen ever since. But a few months later, something else incredible and unexpected happened. In September of 1980, Saddam Hussein's Iraq launched an all-out invasion of conquest into Iran. For years preceding this, Saddam had wanted Iraq to overtake and supplant Iran as the dominant power in the oil-rich Persian Gulf. But they were never capable of doing anything about it, because
it is crazy, though, like how freaky that must be for countries that are bordering each other to be enemies. Even the United States, at least we're like semi-good with Canada and Mexico, right? Like having enemies at your borders where you don't even have you don't have a sea separating you. Like, that would make me so uneasy as a citizen. The U.S. takes that shit for granted. Well, I think the United States takes a lot of shit for granted. But then again, that's why we're the greatest country on earth. What are they going to do? We'll just shoot them. Hey, fuck them. They come to our soil, we'll just fucking shoot them, man. Fuck them.
Iran had a colossally larger military, and they had the support of America and Israel,
That's why China
all of which
built
made
the
her
wall. Yeah, I get it.
vastly more powerful. But after Iran was thrown into chaos by her revolution and regime change, with massive purges and executions of government officials,
Semi Lamau, Canadians hate Americans. Yeah, but they're bitch made and they ain't gonna do nothing about it. Hey, I lived in Canada for 10 years. I can say it, guys. Dude, I would hear that every day about how everybody hated America. Bro, they broke my fucking car's window and shit inside my car because I had Texas plates and bent my plates when Donald Trump got elected. They wouldn't do nothing to me, though. They wouldn't do nothing to me. Right? Is what it is. Is what it is.
and after she was abandoned by both America and Israel and was left without any major foreign allies,
You guys been in Quebec?
Saddam
Nah, London,
calculated
Ontario.
that now was better than ever to take advantage and attack. Iraq expected a rapid victory, but the war that followed turned into an 8-year-long stalemate that most resembled the Western Front of World War I. After the massive Iraqi invasion, Iran was forced to reevaluate the American hostage situation, and they agreed to release all 52 back into U.S. custody after holding them for 444 days. America levied heavy economic sanctions upon Iran as a consequence, and then began heavily supplying Saddam and Iraq in their war effort that they hoped would destabilize Iran even further. The Iran-Iraq War would ultimately prove to be one of the largest and the bloodiest of the 20th century's second half, with as many as 400,000 Iranians losing their lives across the front line, owing in part to the widespread deployment of chemical weapons and landmines from Iraq,
I've unironically never heard of that a single time. Jesus. I did not know it was that bad at all. Well, yeah, shit, I'd be angry too. Damn, that's awful.
Being heavily supplied and supported with conventional weapons.
Yeah, I understand. I am not a history buff at all. I slept every class. So all this shit's new to me, man. We might watch a World War II documentary. Honestly, that sounds like a lot of fun.
By the United States. Throughout the war, the U.S. contends that Hezbollah, a Shia Islamist militia organization operating out of Lebanon who is a client of Iran, carried out multiple anti-American.
Ain't that the Hamas flag? Ain't this the flag that Hassan really likes? Yeah, it is. Dude, look at that, man. I've shit on Hassan so much, I actually know what's kind of going on in the world now. That's what's fucked up.
American terror attacks across the
region.
That's Hezbollah? In 1983,
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
They carried out a bombing of the U.S. Embassy in Beirut, which killed 17 Americans.
Yeah, that's Hezbollah, the guy who really hates gay people. I remember that.
And later that same year, they carried out another massive truck bombing attack against the barracks of a military compound in Lebanon, which killed a further 241 American and 58.
Hassan told me yesterday the U.S. government is more evil than Iran's. I asked if the U.S. is also hanging homosexual people like Iran does. He said yes. I clipped it, then I got banned because I asked why he's always insulting Asman if they can't be friends. Send me that clip, man. I'd love to see it.
French soldiers. These events and others contributed to the United States placing Iran on their state sponsors of terrorism list the following year in 1984. By April of 1988, the Iran-Iraq War was still raging, and Iran had mined a large section of the Persian Gulf in order to counter the Iraqi Navy. An American frigate who happened to be passing through struck one of these mines and became severely damaged and almost sank, but with no loss of life. Regardless, America decided to initiate a retaliatory attack against Iranian targets and initiated Operation Praying Mantis.
My chat was just talking about Operation Praying Mantis. Oh, shit. Also, easy clap. Hey, that's your best shot? No diff. 0 casualties. Holy shit. Okay, Operation Praying Mantis. I heard this shit was awesome.
Largest U.S. naval combat operation seen since the Second World War, and it saw 2 American surface groups launching coordinated strikes that blew up 2 Iranian offshore oil platforms and sank 6 of their warships. The attack destroyed or severely damaged half of Iran's entire fleet and killed 56 Iranians, while resulting in only 2 American deaths. Just 3 months later,
28-1 KDA. That's insane.
In July of 1988,
28-2.
American
That's good
cruisers
ratios.
strayed into Iranian
Can you imagine how many Infinity Edges you could buy with that?
Received warning shots fired from Iranian speedboats. At the same time, Iran Air Flight 655, that was taking its normal flight route above from Tehran to Dubai, and was at this point flying over Iran's territorial waters above the Strait of Hormuz. The American cruiser misidentified this commercial aircraft as an Iranian fighter jet and, assuming that they could have been under attack, they launched a missile that targeted and then completely destroyed the whole plane. There were 290 people on board that flight, and 254—
Yeah, there it is. Down with USA, down with Israel. They upgraded from down with Israel to death to USA, death to Israel. Yeah, I remember this.
4 of them were Iranians. None of them survived the missile strike, and it was the deadliest aviation shoot-down incident in history until the horrible shoot-down of Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 over Ukraine.
Okay, so let me ask you an honest question. I genuinely don't know this answer, and I'm asking sheerly out of ignorance. Are they dressing like this due to religious reasons, or are they dressing like this because women have less rights? Both? Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong. Saudi Arabia is still like that, right? Because I remember when WWE went to Saudi Arabia, all of the women had to wear like different clothes. That is what Sharia law is in a sense. It's getting better. They raise that the religion tells them they have to. Okay. And why does the religion tell them they have to? What exactly is the reason? I don't want to judge anybody's religion whatsoever, but I am just curious. Why do they have to wear that? So out of all that shit, hundreds of innocent people dying. Hold up. So out of all that shit, hundreds of innocent people dying because of USA, all you have to ask is why do they wear what they wear? Well, I already know why people died. It's because, you know, death happens in war. You know what I mean? That's just what happens. You know, it sucks. It's not good. I'm not happy about any of it. But yeah, some guy 2,000 years ago, because Islam wants to protect them from indecent men. Modesty, because otherwise men can get horny and that's haram. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Gotcha. I'm not going to question it. I'm just, you know, I just wanted to know their reasoning. All right, cool. Let's keep going here.
By pro-Russian rebels more than a quarter century later. These deadly events between both sides sharply escalated tensions between America and Iran, and each felt that the other had done grievous harm towards them. In 1995, the Clinton administration enacted a total—
Because women shouldn't tempt men, so the woman should only show herself to her husband. Finally, a culture I can get behind. Too many hoes over here in America, guys. Too many fucking hoes. I'll be real, man. There is more chicks in Austin that have an OnlyFans that don't. Sorry, boys. It is what it is. You know it's the fucking truth. Yep. Let's cover the fuck up. Yeah. Hey. If you tell me you have a body count higher than 10, not interested. I'll be real. For me, if you have a body count higher than 3, not interested. Because if you've let that many, and this goes with men as well. This goes with men as well. If you've let that many people run through you, you're just an idiot. Hey. Yup, sorry. And that obviously scales. If you're 20 and you already have a body count higher than 5, you're a hoe. If you're 30 and you have a body count higher than 8, you're a dumbass. It is what it is, guys. Sorry. Hey. I'm not trying to fuck nobody. We're putting my dick in their vagina. It feels like fucking a jar of mayonnaise. You can hate me if you want. I have standards. Anyways, let's keep going here.
Embargo on all dealings with Iran by any American-based company, which effectively killed all trade between both countries. In 1996, the Iranian client Hezbollah carried out yet another terror bombing strike against a U.S. target in Saudi Arabia, this time killing 19 American Air Force personnel and wounding nearly 500 others. And then, 5 years after that, came the September 11th attacks.
I know a lot about these. Bro, this shit was scary as fuck, man. Y'all remember anthrax? Holy shit. My stepmom got sent to the hospital over anthrax. She was a bitch, but she didn't deserve that. Man, this shit was wild. I remember airports before and after 9/11. Night and day, bro. I remember airports were quick, simple, effective. And now it's like, bro, 50 minutes at my airport. You go to fucking JFK airport, bro, you're there for fucking 3 hours trying to get to your terminal. It's been a fucking nightmare since then.
Just 4 months after 9/11, U.S. President Bush made his axis of evil.
Where were you when the towers fell? I was in school. I was in art class. I was drawing a cow. I don't know. Yeah, I was drawing pictures of a cow. I didn't really get it. Oh well.
speech, in which he lumped Iran, Saddam's Iraq, and North Korea all together as an axis of evil conspiring against America. Just a little more than a year after that speech, the United States used the pretext of Saddam possessing weapons of mass destruction to invade Iraq and completely toppled his regime in around a month. No
Weapon of mass destruction is what they call Frogan when she walks into a Taco Bell.
weapons of mass destruction were ever uncovered, and the message sent to both Iran and North Korea was clear as day. It was either develop nuclear weapons, or you would be next. North Korea managed to successfully test an atomic bomb just 3 years after
Weapon of ass destruction is what Hassan's dick is called whenever one of his female friends asks for a raid.
the American-led invasion of Iraq, while Iran hastily carried out their own nuclear weapons research as well. However, the United States made it clear that a nuclear-armed Iran would never be tolerated, and a combination of sanctions—
Okay, so genuine question. I liked George W. Bush Jr. when I was a kid. How did the rest of the world feel about him? Why did Bush do it? Mixed, but Iraq war was bad. Bush has aura, but bro's a war criminal, and Europe was cool with him. Before Bush Jr., the USA didn't have an insane deficit.
clear that a nuclear-armed Iran would—
Wait, classic Bush clip? What's this?
والمدنيين فإننا نقترب كثيرا من هذه النهاية.
شكرا زيرو.
Easy. Easy dodge. Bro went ultra instinct.
would never be tolerated, and a combination of sanctions and diplomacy were used for years to try and convince Iran to stop.
Yeah,
By
hot take, I think
2015,
nukes are bad,
the Obama
guys.
administration had successfully negotiated
I am horrified of the day a country dumb enough to release a nuclear bomb does so. I think releasing a nuclear bomb is end of civilization as we know it. Because the moment someone opens the floodgates, I feel like everybody's going to do that. Yep, I really, really, really do. I really, really, really do. And it's a horrifying, horrifying, horrifying thought. Only USA has done this so far. So the USA nuked Japan, right? And then they went from correct me if I'm wrong, after they got nuked, now they're the most kawaii nation of all time. So now they're like all kawaii. So like, I don't know what the radiation did, but like kind of like, you know, it's kind of like the ayaya pill, bro. It's actually kind of nuts.
the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, better known colloquially as the Iran nuclear deal. The treaty's terms are complex, but the TLDR is that the US agreed to end a sweeping series of sanctions they had previously placed upon Iran, while Iran
Dude, if we nuke every country, can we imagine how much more anime we'll get? When everybody's that kawaii, when they rise from the ashes. Like, imagine all of like the sushi and the anime if we just nuke everywhere. Dude, we might actually finally get cat girls.
agreed to give up their pursuit of nuclear research and allowed foreign inspections to routinely investigate them. Iran's and America's relationship was beginning to show some signs of rapprochement. But then, things took another curveball. In 2016, Donald Trump was elected the new president of the United States on a platform that included a vow to fully withdraw the US from the Iran nuclear deal and to reinstate tougher economic sanctions. In 2018, Trump carried through with these campaign promises, and Iran counter-threatened that they would continue on with their nuclear program and even close the Strait of Hormuz to international shipping if things escalated any further, which would have completely crashed the global oil economy. Relations between the two were back to being tense, and then things got even worse the next year. In May and June of 2019, several merchant ships traveling through the Persian Gulf were damaged in two separate violent incidents. The West blamed Iran, and then Iran denied all involvement. In June, Iran shot down an American drone that was flying over the Strait of Hormuz, and tensions increased even further. And then in July, an Iranian oil tanker was seized by the UK as it was passing through the Strait of Gibraltar on the grounds that it was shipping oil to the Bashar al-Assad regime in Syria, in direct violation of EU sanctions.
God, can you imagine if Kamala Harris was in charge for dealing with the Iran and Israel conflict right now? I feel like it would be such a shit show. Like, straight up. And I know a lot of people would say, oh, well, the war wouldn't have happened if Kamala was in office. Bro, the Dems would have done the exact same fucking thing. I don't want to think about that. I hate that cunt. Absolutely nobody would respect Kamala. Fucking zero, bro.
Iran countered this by capturing a British oil tanker and taking its crew hostage.
And I know people don't like war, but I would much rather much rather be in a war than lose a war. As long as they ain't stepping on American soil, hey man, that's a hell of a lot better than the alternative.
As it was later passing through the Persian Gulf. Both sides eventually released the other ships and crew, but it was clear that tensions were reaching a boiling point. And then they dramatically escalated near the end of the year.
You can't lose a war if you're not in one? Yeah, you can't be killed if you say you don't wanna. Okay, I don't realize if you just say, oh, I don't wanna, then all of a sudden that you can't get shot anymore. Okay, gotcha.
On the 27th of December 2019, a rocket artillery attack from some assailant on America's K-1 military base in Iraq left one U.S. civilian contractor dead and 4 other soldiers wounded. America blamed the attack on Hezbollah and other Shiite Islamist militias supported by Iran, though both Hezbollah and Iran denied all responsibility. At this point, there were about 5,000 U.S. troops who were stationed in Iraq who were helping in the ongoing fight against ISIL. And 2 days later, on the 29th, they decided to initiate a retaliatory strike against Hezbollah's weapons depots and command centers across both Iraq and Syria. These American airstrikes killed 25 Hezbollah-affiliated militiamen and wounded nearly 60 others, escalating things even further.
Am I crazy, or are these rookie numbers? You know what I'm saying? You see bombs of that destruction level and you assume thousands. And then you hear a number like 25 and it's like, well, what went wrong? You really think it would be blowing up more.
A couple days after that, on December the 31st, Iran-backed militiamen stormed and attacked the United States Embassy in Baghdad. The embassy was heavily vandalized, but nobody on either side was killed, and the US blamed Iran once again for the provocation.
They intentionally don't target civilians. That's good. That's really, really, really good.
And then came the 3rd of January 2020, when the already high tensions skyrocketed to levels never seen before. Qasem Soleimani, an Iranian major general widely believed to be the second most powerful figure within the Iranian regime, had just arrived in Baghdad on a flight. He was scheduled to meet with Iraq's prime minister later on in the day, but as he departed the Baghdad airport in a convoy of vehicles, a US drone that had been hovering nearby overhead fired a series of missiles that completely destroyed them. This missile strike had been personally authorized and ordered by President Donald Trump himself, and resulted in the deaths of Soleimani and 9 others. This event profoundly changed the crisis between Iran and the United States. It was the first time that America had assassinated a major military leader of a major foreign country since the plot to kill Isoroku Yamamoto of the Japanese Imperial Navy back in 1943, who had been the mastermind of the Pearl Harbor attacks. 2 days later, Iran announced that it would no longer abide by any of the terms of the 2015 nuclear deal and demanded that Iraq remove all of the American presence from their country. And then, on the 8th of January, 5 days after Soleimani's death, Iran launched its own retaliatory strike against America. Codenamed Operation Martyr Soleimani, Iran initiated multiple ballistic missile strikes against
Operation
2
Praying
U.S.
Mantis
military bases within Iraq, and the entire world held its breath. This was the closest that America and Iran had ever come to full-scale war, and the crisis could have easily escalated into that. America had already rapidly deployed thousands of soldiers to the Persian Gulf from the US East Coast in the days between Soleimani's death and this Iranian artillery attack, but thankfully, nobody was killed by it. The bases experienced significant damage to buildings and infrastructure, but everybody present remained alive. And this was sort of a godsend because it gave both Iran and America the opportunity to de-escalate without losing any face. Iran got to look strong and powerful by firing rockets at American targets, and without any casualties, America was given the option not to retaliate, which is what they chose to do. Unfortunately, though, tragedy still managed to find a way to strike. While Iran likely designed the attack intentionally to not cause any American casualties, Iran didn't necessarily know that the US wasn't going to retaliate, and their anti-air batteries across the country were on high alert for any kind of response. One of these missile batteries detected what they believed to be an American cruise missile on their radar, and they opened fire on it with 2 surface-to-air missiles. It turned out that the target wasn't a cruise missile at all, but was just a regularly scheduled commercial airliner that had just taken off from Tehran International Airport mere minutes before.
Oh,
the plane in
shit.
question was Ukraine International Airlines Flight 752, traveling from Tehran to Kiev
shit.
with 176 people on board. The Iranian missiles completely destroyed the plane and killed everybody on board, including 82 Iranian
shit.
and 63 Canadian citizens.
What? Ooh, hold up. We're gonna go back and hear that again. Ooh, hold up.
Not to retaliate, which is what they chose to do. Unfortunately, though, tragedy still managed to find a way to strike. While Iran likely designed the attack intentionally to not cause any American casualties, Iran didn't necessarily know that the US wasn't going to retaliate, and their anti-air batteries across the country were on high alert for any kind of response. One of these missile batteries detected what they believed to be an American cruise missile on their radar, and they opened fire on it with 2 surface-to-air missiles. It turned out that the target wasn't a cruise missile at all, but was just a regularly scheduled commercial airliner that had just taken off from Tehran International Airport mere minutes before.
That's
the plane in question was Ukraine International Airlines Flight 752, traveling from Tehran to Kiev with 176 people on board. The Iranian missiles completely destroyed the plane and killed everybody on board.
I'm gonna assume a lot of people don't buy that shit that was on accident. Is that? I feel like that's probably a controversial topic. I feel a lot of people feel like they meant to do that shit. They knew it was a plane. I don't buy it. It was on accident. Rip. I wouldn't. Yeah, there's no way that was accidental. Yeah, they were so gung-ho and paranoid they accidentally killed their own civvies. That's awful. Yeah, that's fucking terrible, bro. Oh my God. Jesus. I don't know why they would shoot their own plane. Yeah, also true. I mean, fuck, that's terrible, bro.
Including 82 Iranian and 63 Canadian citizens.
Ooh, that's so
Initially, the Iranian government denied all responsibility and attempted to cover the disaster up by blaming the crash on technical faults with the plane itself.
Oh,
but after
Jesus
raising
Christ.
suspicion when they wouldn't allow any investigators access to the crash site, the government finally admitted to mistakenly shooting the plane down a few days later on January 11th. That attempted cover-up sparked massive protests across
Oh yeah, when your nation finds out that you're lying to them, that's obviously going to piss anybody off.
Iran and against the regime, and the brink of war against the United States had just narrowly been avoided.
Yep.
Hundreds of innocent people died as a result of the conflict between Iran and the United States in 2020. But of course, it could have always been far worse. Had the conflict escalated by any number of countless different ways, all-out war could have broken out that would have resulted in the deaths of many, many more. I only hope that peace between my country and Iran can be maintained in the future.
Well, this video, in fact, aged absolutely horrifically. Wow. This aged so bad. Yeah, it's not looking so good, man. Yeah, we'll see.
But at the same time, I'm aware of how precarious this piece is and the history behind all of this. And I'm fearful that one day in the future, we might not get as relatively lucky as we did at the beginning of 2020.
This video was originally released on Nebula as a part of my exclusive.
That was a absolutely fantastic video, and now I get it. Damn, dude, history is kind of cool when you really like actually give a fuck. That was actually pretty fucking dope. Let me actually link that video. That was great. Yeah, maybe we spend a little bit more time getting educated. It's really nice understanding why this shit happened. And yeah, I understand essentially why it happened. It's Iran had what we wanted. We took too much. That made them upset. They were being irresponsible with who they were trying to get their resources to. The Nazis. And we said, nah, you don't know how to do that shit. You're going to give that shit to us. And they said, well, we don't like that. We want to do what we want to do. And we said, fuck no, we're not. And then bombs happened. Okay. So it's kind of like, yeah. All right. So it's kind of like that. Damn. Once you get educated, it becomes depressing, TBH. It makes you look at people in the world in a doomer way. Yeah, for sure. I also like learning a lot about history because I don't think there's any... This country's 100% in the right, and this country's 100% in the wrong. I think everything's a shade of gray. So that's very interesting to learn all that shit. And that was cool. We should watch some more. Like, comment, subscribe. Great video, by the way.